And I want to emphasise that I think we should stay inside the EU. Remaining inside the European Union does make us more secure. It does make us more prosperous, and it does make us more influential beyond our shores. So this is my analysis of the rights and wrongs, the opportunities and risks of our membership of the EU, and the reason I believe it is clearly in our national interest to remain a member of the European Union. I think it's right for us to remain precisely because I believe in Britain's strength, in our economic, diplomatic and military clout, because I am optimistic about our future, because I believe in our ability to lead and not just follow. Given that British exports in goods and services to countries outside the EU are rising, one can hardly argue that the EU prevents this from happening. Leaving the EU, on the other hand, might make it considerably harder. In a standoff between Britain and the EU, 44% of our exports is more important to us than 8% of the EU's exports is to them. Now, it's tempting to look at developing countries' economies with their high growth rates and see them as an alternative to trade with Europe. But just look at the reality of our trading relationship with China, with its dumping policies, protective tariffs, and industrial-scale industrial espionage, and look at the figures. We export more to Ireland than we do to China, almost twice as much to Belgium as we do to India, and nearly 3 times as much to Sweden as we do to Brazil. It is not realistic to think we could just replace European trade with these new markets. And the reality is that we do not know on what terms we would have access to the single market. We do know that in a negotiation we would need to make concessions in order to access it. And those concessions could well be about accepting EU regulations over which we would have no say, making financial contributions just as we do now, accepting free movement rules just as we do now, or quite possibly all 3 combined. It's not clear why other EU member states would give Britain a better deal than they themselves enjoy. Remaining a member of the European Union means we will be more secure from crime and terrorism. Now, I know that some people say the EU does not make us more secure because it does not allow us to control our border. But that is not true. Free movement rules mean it is harder to control the volume of European immigration, and as I said yesterday, that is clearly no good thing. But they do not mean we cannot control the border. The fact that we are not part of Schengen, the group of countries without border checks, means we have avoided the worst of the migration crisis that has hit continental Europe over the last year. Brexit also risks changing our friendships and alliances from further afield. In particular, as President Obama has said, it risks changing our alliance with the United States. That would not, I believe, be in our national interest. Britain can, and often does, lead in Europe. The creation of the single market was driven by Mrs. Thatcher. The competitiveness and trade agendas now pursued by the Commission were begun at the behest of Britain and Germany. And I can tell you that on matters of counter-terrorism and security, the rest of Europe instinctively looks towards us. But it shouldn't be a notable exception when Britain leads in Europe. It should become the norm. Of course Britain could cope outside the European Union. But the question is not whether we could survive without the EU, but whether we are better off in or out. The case to remain a member of the European Union is strong.